Welcome to Shield Maidens, Women of the Norse World, the podcast that celebrates the remarkable women of the Viking Age. From fierce warriors and powerful queens to wise seers and cunning goddesses, these women left an indelible mark on history. Join authors Johanna Wittenberg and K.S. Barton each month as we explore the stories, achievements, and impact of Norse women. Welcome to Shield Maidens, Women of the Norse World. This is episode 30, in which Johanna and I talk about Lagertha, the historical and legendary shield maiden, and how she was portrayed in the TV show Vikings. We'll also delve into the character of Aslaug, another character on the show, one of Ragnar's wives, and another woman straight from the sagas. I'm K.S. Barton, author of the Norse Family Trilogy, in which a young Viking woman and a Viking warrior are caught in a deadly blood feud between two brothers. And with me is Johanna Wittenberg. Hi, Johanna.
Hello. I'm Johanna Wittenberg, author of the Norse Women series, which is the story of a real Norse queen who ruled alone in the early 9th century, the dawn of the Viking Age.
So first, I want to give a little spoiler alert. At some point, we are going to be discussing at least the first two seasons of the TV show Vikings. So if you haven't seen it and you want to watch it and you don't want anything spoiled, we'll give you a heads up that we're heading into TV show territory. And I'll also include it in the show notes when that all starts and stops. So if you're just interested in the historical stuff, we'll let you know.
I expect a lot of people have already seen it because what year did it come out? 2014, 20?
I think it was 13.
Maybe you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah, right.
Mhm.
So it's been out for a long time and it's been on Netflix for some time, right?
Yeah, a long time.
Long
Yeah.
time. So
But still, who knows? Maybe somebody's out there who's like, oh, yeah, I still haven't watched that yet. I have plenty of shows that I still am like, they've been out for a long time and I haven't watched.
Well, I was so excited when that TV show Vikings first came out because I was just starting to draft my first novel.
Me
And it
too.
was just so amazing to be able to see a Viking village, the long ships, the people. I mean, just to help me with my visualization. It was fabulous. I was thrilled.
Yeah, me too. I thought they did a really good job. I know people have picked it apart, like, the costumes weren't, the haircuts or blah, 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 blah. But in general, I thought, yeah, like you, I thought they did a great job of immersing you in that Viking world. Like when they're in the Earl's, longhouse or whatever, even though he would have been called a jarl.
Yep. But it was in English,
Yeah, it was in English. But yeah, just the scenes in there, the way everything, was lit by candlelight and or torches or whatever, just and the villages and it looked good.
There really hadn't been anything like it on the screen because, unless you went way back to the 50s and, those fakey, the
Mm.
Vikings and the those early shows that were, not at all accurate. So it was just cool to see something that was pretty accurate.
Hmm. Especially when they also showed Ragnar and Lagertha as farmers. They had a
Yes.
really nice farm, but they had this nice farm where, they show her at the loom, they show her as a mother, and they've got these animals in this farm, and they're fishing, and they're just doing all these things that people did. So that was nice too, to show that there was more to Viking life than just raiding and fighting.
Yeah, and they used in those first couple seasons, they used a lot of instances from research and sagas and like I remember one of the things they had was a scene from Ibn Fadlan where he had talked about how the serving maid brought in the bowl and
Mm-hmm.
they all blew their nose in the bowl and
Yeah.
passed it around. Well, they actually had that scene in the first season. I'm like, wow, I just read about that.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, they did. It was a good job. And Lagertha in particular was a really well thought out character. And that she was a shield maiden and a mother and a wife and all these different things was nice to see. And it's funny you mentioned the 1950s. I think was it Kirk Douglas? Was it a
Yes.
movie called The Vikings?
Yes, and it was Kirk Douglas and Tony Curtis.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I mean that was like the only Viking movie that was out there at this time, It was
I watched one scene. I had a scene in my first book where my main male character runs the oars. Have you
Oh,
heard? And I was like, was that a
mhm.
real thing? And I was looking it up, and I was like, sure, they it was
Olaf
like,
Tryggvason did
yeah, there's a little feat of strength, and so I have him
and
do that,
coordination.
right? And there's a scene, I think Kirk Douglas does it in that movie. I've never seen the whole movie, but I did watch that scene because I was just curious, how it was shown. It was actually a fun little scene of him running the oars.
Yeah, I did watch the whole movie when I was first starting my book because it was about the only thing that was available. And then there was also another movie that came out after it called The Long Ships, and it was based on the book The Long Ships.
Oh, I read that book. Was that the
Yes,
one
I
by
did too.
Bankson? Was that his
Yep.
name?
Yep. And but it was not a very good movie. It was not well done.
Mm,
But I did read it because I was just interested and I had read that Long Ships as one of my research books.
me too. Yeah,
So,
I read that too. Yeah, in case anybody doesn't know, running the oars is when they're actually rowing and somebody gets out onto the oars, or at least I don't know, the post part of the oar, not the actual part
mhm.
that dips into the
Not the
water.
paddle part.
Yeah, and they actually run from jump from one oar to the next as they're moving.
Yes,
So it
as they're
takes
rowing.
as they're rowing and the boat is moving. So it takes quite a bit of coordination and balance. And it's dangerous too, because if you fall, you could get hit in the head, you could drown, you could get dragged under the boat. So yeah, it's kind of a
Almost
neat thing.
everything they did was dangerous. Yeah,
Right.
actually, Dorothy Dunnett had a scene in her book King Hereafter where Thorfinn, her Viking, runs the oars, and she describes it in great detail. I
Mm.
mean, as she did everything, but like pages of description of this feat that he did.
Oh, neat.
And he attributed the first person to ever have done it as Olaf Tryggvason, or the person to make it famous
Maybe
anyway.
make it a thing. Yeah. Now it would be like a
Hmm.
TikTok challenge. People running the oars. Yeah, mine was told from the point of view of my female character because she's like, "Who's this guy?" That kind of thing. Yeah. Should we jump into Lagertha?
Let's do it.
Okay. So her story is told in Saxo Grammaticus's 13th century work, the Gesta Danorum, The Deeds of the Danes. I love alliteration. I love their love of alliteration.
And they were very into that. The
Yeah.
poets had to use alliteration, the
Yeah. I,
skalds.
I wrote a poem or verse recently, just playing around with it, and I just want because I wanted to play with alliteration. It was really fun. So the story of Lagertha and Ragnar, it starts with the defeat of Ragnar's grandfather. He was the Norwegian king Sigurd, and the Swedish king, I don't know if it's Fro or Fru, I don't know how you pronounce it, Fro. He defeated Ragnar's grandfather. And part of that defeat, he put King Seward's female family members into a brothel. So when word of this reached Ragnar, Ragnar at this time was the king of Jutland in Denmark. And so because this was his grandfather, he decided to do something about this injustice. And when he gets to Norway, he's met by the women of the household who had all been, mistreated. And some of these women were dressed up as men, and they were ready to get their revenge, which I don't
Hmm.
doubt at all. But I thought it was interesting that they were dressed up as men
Yeah. And
and weren't punished for it or anything like this. It's just kind of
well,
mentioned, not like this was a terrible thing. They were just dressed like men.
I don't think that it was punishable by law until they were Christianized.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
agree.
I think if and the other thing I thought when I read that is I wondered maybe they dressed up as men to escape the brothel. I
Oh,
don't know.
could.
I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
no
yeah.
idea.
That
But
would
it
make
was just
sense.
something that popped in my head,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to escape.
That's a good thought. Yeah. So these women fought bravely. during the battle, especially one. And Ragnar even claimed later that this woman turned the tide of the battle. And this, of course, was Lagertha. And this is how Saxo described her. A skilled Amazon who, though a maiden, had the courage of a man and fought in front among the bravest with her hair loose over her shoulders. All marveled at her matchless deeds, for her locks flying down her back betrayed that she was a woman. That's pretty high praise for
Yeah,
this
for
Danish
13th
guy.
century Christian
Yeah,
man.
she was the bravest. They were all marveling at her. But then so it's interesting. Maybe this is a 13th century thing because her locks betrayed her as a woman. Or is he saying that men didn't have long hair? Or is he just
Well,
basing it on the 13th century in Denmark where men didn't have long hair?
some of the images of men that we have that come from like the ninth century, from the Oseberg ship, for example, there are some male heads carved in some of the places. And like I think on the sleigh, or no, the sleigh or the cart, I can't remember now,
Hmm.
but they show like a page boy cut. So it's shoulder
Oh,
length. They're
okay.
not long. They're about shoulder length, and they're very carefully trimmed straight across. And then
Mm-hmm.
they have like, mustache that's well trimmed. So we do have some images of men from that time period, and they don't have long hair down their back. They have long hair that's like shoulder length.
Hmm.
So I
Okay.
suspect that was probably, the a fashionable man looked like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I always wondered about the long hair Viking thing because it's like that would get in the way
Hmm.
in a battle. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, you would pull it back, braid it, or wrap it up, or somehow. But even still, you can grab it, you can pull it, you can.
Well,
It's a liability.
I don't really think there's anything I don't remember anything in the sagas that talk about Viking men having long hair.
No.
They have
Mm-mm.
beards, but
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily long hair. So my suspicion is that they did wear it like shoulder length.
Mm-hmm. Most
Not,
of my Viking men in my books, I gave them shoulder length hair.
it just makes more sense.
Uh-huh. Fits better under a helmet. Like, I mean, as
Yeah,
somebody who's had longish hair for most of my life and did things like a martial art and gymnastics and stuff, long hair, even in a ponytail, gets in the way.
it
The
does.
ponytail pops out in the back. Like, I don't know how you would put a helmet. So you'd have to braid it low, like down your back. So, anyway, I always wondered about the actual logistics of having really long hair in a battle.
Yeah, and I have one character, Rangild, she has really long hair, but it's always in a ratty braid down her back. And it's always really messy.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, let's see. Where do we leave off? Oh, okay. So Lagertha is shown to be brave, and she's also of noble birth, which in the Viking world was a good thing. They were very classist, at least in the stories they were.
Mhm.
Like even stories. Who were we talking about? Was it last time? Anyway, I don't remember well, maybe it was Aslaug. Anyway, I don't know. Somebody like they just she was like a peasant woman, but because of the way she looked or whatever, they just knew she had to be noble born or something like that.
That's Aslaug.
It
Yeah.
is Aslaug. Okay. So I thought there was another one. She was like a charcoal burner's
Oh, I don't
daughter
know
or
about that one,
something, and she was like noble born, and they could tell.
but this is also all written down later. So whether that was, who knows if
Mm,
that's what they really believed back. But
good
it
point.
probably is because they did make
Probably.
class distinctions.
So after Ragnar returned home, he was smitten by this courageous shield maiden, and he started sending her messages. And I don't know how one sends messages in like and
Viking texts.
yeah. Write something on a rune stick and send it
Yeah.
along with
Yeah.
a messenger. I don't know. Saxo doesn't show it. According to Saxo, Lagertha is not interested in Ragnar, but she leads him on.
Ugh.
But Ragnar's confident that he's won her over. So he heads to Norway to claim her. But there he's in for a shock. Because out in front of her house, she has two guardians, a dog and a bear. And I'm sure the dog was huge,
Hint, hint, Ragnar. He's just not into you.
When her house is guarded with two animals, he's just not that into you. Of course, Ragnar defeats both guardians. He kills one with a spear and the other he chokes to death with his bare hands. And Saxo doesn't say which one is which. And
Oh,
it doesn't really matter. And here's what he says. Thus he had the maiden as the prize of the peril he had overcome. Ugh. So
eeks.
as a prize, yeah. So they get married and they have two daughters who are unnamed in the sagas, of course, and a son named Fridleif. And Ragnar says Ragnar lived with Lagertha and their children in Norway for 3 years. And I was looking at that thinking, they have three children in 3 years? Or did they have the three children and then he lived with them for an additional 3 years? Because
That's a good question.
three kids in 3 years, that'd be rough.
It would.
But after the 3 years, unrest in his kingdom in Denmark drove Ragnar back, and Lagertha stayed in Norway. So it is during
With the
this time
kids,
with the kids, of course.
of course.
So it's during this time that Ragnar gets his nickname of Hairy Breeches. He also has a run-in with a dragon, which is probably not part of the real history of Ragnar. Even though I'd love to believe that there were dragons at some point in like the dark, dark history of the world.
Well, you know what I've always thought about that is that I think they found dinosaur skeletons. And
Oh,
so that's where the idea of dragons came from. And
mm.
thinking maybe that, that they were still around, that they weren't thousands of years old, but that, there really were dragons. They just never saw them. That's what my theory is.
That is a great theory. I love that theory.
Because,
Yeah,
I mean, they must have dug up some bones at some point. And what would you think?
exactly. And there's dragons in so many different cultures too.
I know. I know.
Hmm,
And, think about dinosaurs. They really kind of were dragons. I don't know if they were fire breathing, but dragons are not always fire breathing in mythology.
right.
And
That's
maybe
a
some of
really
them
cool
were. I
theory.
don't know. Maybe when they burped. That spicy pterodactyl they ate.
That's a really cool theory. I like that. So, during this time, Ragnar divorced Lagertha and he married another woman named Thora. And divorce in the Viking Age was not a big deal.
Right?
Really wasn't.
Exactly.
Not like it became later in the Christian era. It was you pretty much just had to declare it.
And that was true in many cultures. And the Christianization is what really started persuading people to stay together and to get married, to stay married and not get divorced.
So Saxo said that Ragnar thought ill of Lagertha because she had set those two guardians up against him.
Oh, for heaven's sake. It's only
I,
fair.
to me, it's just that typical, here's a king, a powerful king, and he meets a new woman who he thinks will serve him better as his wife, so he just gets rid of the old wife. Get rid of the old wife, bring in the new wife.
Hmm.
They did that all the time. Send
They
them off
did.
to nunneries, or not the Vikings, but later they would do stuff
Well,
like that.
they had to find ways to dispose of those pesky wives.
Yeah. And Lagertha remarried too. And but sometime later, Ragnar needed assistance from his allies in Norway and including Lagertha. And because, according to Saxo, she still had a deep love for Ragnar, she and her new husband and her son sailed with 120 ships to help Ragnar.
So,
That,
maybe Saxo exaggerated just a little, but
you think 120 ships?
that's a huge fleet.
That's huge.
Do you know how long it would take to build that many Viking ships? I mean, I'm sorry, but they
And
didn't have that kind of population.
where would you house them all? Like, where would you
Yeah.
dry dock them in the winter? And like, where do you have enough
And what
land even
forest
in
would you denude? You
right.
know?
Yeah. And how many men would that be? Yeah, that's a
Well, yeah,
huge
because
number of
you
men.
needed 30 or 40 people to man a ship because you had to have some relief. You couldn't just have a bear crew where, and if they had 16 oars on each side, that's 32 plus the
Hmm.
helmsman.
Hmm.
That's like, 35 is the minimum, and that's for a smaller ship.
Right. Yeah, that's a bit of an exaggeration.
It's a bit. Yes.
Maybe three or four.
Yeah.
So once again, Lagertha saves the day. So here's what
Yeah.
Saxo has to say. Lagertha, who had a matchless spirit, though a delicate frame, covered by her splendid bravery the inclination of the soldiers to waver. For she made a sally about and flew round to the rear of the enemy, taking them unawares, and thus turned the panic of her friends into the camp of the enemy. At last the lines of Harold became slack, and Harold himself was routed with a great slaughter of his men. At that point, I guess whenever she comes to Ragnar's aid, he has good things to say about her.
Just short temporarily though.
Yeah.
But somewhere I read, I can't even remember where recently, about how possibly they were saying that Lagertha maybe was a witch or something, and that when she
Mm.
flew around, you were talking about Valkyries earlier.
Yeah, yeah. That makes me think of a Valkyrie flying to the enemy and changing the outcome of the battle. It's very Valkyrie-like. But he doesn't really make those connections. So,
No, it was kind of made later by
mm,
others that were suggesting. But the term flew around probably means just rushed around very quickly.
hurried. Yeah, like we
Yeah,
use. Yeah. Oh
yeah.
my gosh, I flew across the room to get to something. Yeah. So, but not surprisingly, Saxo does not have kind words to say about Lagertha. In the end, they do this all the time with these strong women.
Well, it's those Christian men.
I know.
Nobody else did before they came along. I
Yeah.
can guarantee that.
So when she returned home to Norway, she murdered her husband in the night with a spearhead that she had hidden in her nightgown. And Saxo says, then she usurped the whole of his name and sovereignty, for this most presumptuous dame thought it pleasanter to rule without her husband than to share the throne with him. And that's the frustrating end to Lagertha's story in Saxo. We're moving on now to talk about the actual TV show and how they portrayed Lagertha.
Just to begin with, as you mentioned to me earlier, Ragnar, Lagertha, the other people, Rollo, they're not nobility in the TV show Vikings. They're actually everyday people, just trying to get along. They're warriors. She is a shield maiden, and they do keep the story about the dog and the bear on, in front of her house because he tells their son Bjorn this story. And so she is a famous shield maiden in this, and she's portrayed as, like you said earlier, a mother, a shield maiden, someone doing all the work around the farmstead and the house. And she probably was like
Hmm.
that. I mean,
Hmm.
women probably did live very much the way she did.
There was a scene in I don't know the first couple of episodes of the first season. They're all in the house, and Rollo, Ragnar's brother, was there, and he said something. He was telling the kids, like, your mother was, he started to say, your mother was a great shield maiden. She walked by and she was like, is. Like,
That's right. That's right.
I thought that was really funny.
Yes. And there's another scene where the Earl's henchman comes and tries to take Bjorn away from her,
Mm,
and she just puts her hand on her axe. It's just like a household axe. And he looks, his eyes kind of flick over there, and he changes direction really fast
yeah,
because he knows her reputation and he
yeah.
doesn't want to test her.
Hmm. There were several instances early on. Some men came to the farm when
Hmm.
Ragnar was away and they tried to rape her and she fought them off and she didn't even kill them. She just fought them well enough that they were like, they just ran away. And
Well, the
so,
first thing she says when they walk in is she says to her daughter, "Feed the goats." And the
yeah,
daughter just goes, "Okay." I mean, her daughter's like what, 6, 7 years old, maybe a little bit older. And
I think she
she
was
goes,
closer to 10,
"Oh,
maybe.
okay." She goes off, gets her kid out of the way, and then
Hmm.
she deals with these guys. And she does give them a chance. She says, "Well, I'll be glad to feed you," and
Hmm.
but they continue to threaten her, and
Hmm.
that's that. And
Hmm.
we loved seeing her in action for the very first time in
Oh,
the
right. That's the first
series.
time we
That's the
see her
first
actually
time we've
fight.
actually seen her fight. And so I think that scene in itself won the hearts of people. It really did.
Yeah, probably.
It was such a surprise for one thing, because, at first she's just being a normal housewife. And then
She's
all of
pretty
a sudden,
spunky though, even before
mhm,
she fights. She stands up to Ragnar and
yeah.
she doesn't put up with anything.
Oh, yeah. When he's going to go raiding and he tells her that she has to stay home with the kids,
Yeah.
she is mad. And
Yeah.
she starts beating him with a shield.
Yeah.
It was a good scene.
Yeah, that was fun. And I like that they showed how much he respected her too for being like that,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And that, he's really making the decision not because she's a woman, but because someone has to stay home and take care of the kids. And they don't
Hmm.
have a reliable person to do that. I mean, their parents are not around. So there's nobody to step in and take care of the kids while he's gone. So he actually
Hmm.
had a good reason,
Yeah.
and then once he comes back with the priest, and Ragnar decides the priest can take care of these kids and she can come along on the next raid.
Hmm. I loved it when Bjorn was like, "You're gonna put the slave above me? Like you're gonna leave the slave in charge?" And I thought that was an interesting how Lagertha and Ragnar took to the priest Athelstan.
Hmm.
They found him interesting and they liked talking to him, which I wonder how often that happened. Because in the stories, the slaves are usually treated pretty badly, but I wonder if they ever took
Well,
somebody and then went, you know what? This guy's kind of interesting. He'll become
you
a
know,
friend.
there is a formal ceremony in which you give a slave their freedom. And so, it was Viking society was somewhat fluid, apparently, if you look at the law books and that sort of thing. So, if you remember way back when we did our talk about ale parties, and that you're
Mm,
required to have ale parties if you were a farmer, like Ragnar would have been required to have an ale party during winter nights. And at that time, that was when you would give a slave their freedom. And there was
mm.
actually a ceremony where, I don't remember all the details, but I wrote it up a while back. The master and the slave traded shoes and they
Oh, huh.
drank to it, and the master proclaimed that this slave was now free. And sometimes it was because they bought their freedom. Sometimes there were other ways that they could gain their freedom, and you could lose your freedom as well. You could sell yourself into slavery, and so become an indentured person because of your, needing, of
Mm,
financial loss. So it was actually a normal part of society, and normal people could fall into slavery and then gain their freedom back. So I have that happen in my first book where Olaf, who's a prince, he's a Viking prince, he's kidnapped and sold into slavery. But over time, his master comes to really respect him and no idea really who he is, gives
mm,
him his freedom. And they do that ceremony.
hmm.
So
Yeah, that's neat.
that does not include necessarily their Irish slaves or their English slaves,
Mm.
the priests but there's also in the sagas, remember, there's at least one story where the slaves rose up and killed their masters in Iceland.
I don't
I'm
know if I
trying to remember
remember
that it's
that.
it's one of the Icelandic sagas,
Hmm.
and the they're out there in these homesteads that are actually, very isolated.
Hmm.
And the husband was away, and the slaves rose up and killed everybody and took and then he came back and avenged them. I don't remember. I'll have to look that
Mm,
story up, but it was pretty interesting that,
yeah.
you know, and of course they might because they weren't well
Right.
treated. If they had the opportunity to rise up against their masters, I'm sure they would.
Yeah. And another during that second raid that you mentioned when they go over to England and she joins them and that she one of the guys tries to rape her and she
Hmm.
kills him and when they get back the Earl wants to know why his man got killed and Ragnar tries to take the blame says oh he was
Hmm.
raping my wife and so I killed him and she steps up they're all in the longhouse the Earl is sitting there with his wife and but she's just like, no, that's not true. I killed him. He was trying to rape me and I killed him. And so I like that she stepped in there and took
Hmm.
responsibility for what she'd done. She wasn't going to let her husband claim this because he would have gotten in more trouble than her anyway. I think that was
You would
part
think.
of why she stepped forward.
Yeah, because she was the injured party.
Yeah, yeah. And the Earl had it out for Ragnar. So there
Hmm.
was there was that too. Yeah.
So I want to mention too that these two raids are actually taken from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. They're based on real history, and they follow they kind of tell it from the Vikings' point of view instead of from the English point of view.
Hmm. I love it when they like get their hands on books and they're like, what is why why are these valuable? Like this is garbage. Oh my gosh, one of my favorite scenes, and I'm sorry, it doesn't involve Lagertha. It's when one of their trips to England and they're making a deal with one of the kings and they have to baptize some of the crew. And so Rollo decides to do it. And they go to like dunk him and like touch his head. And he's just like moving back. And he's just like, what the heck are they doing to me? It's really quite comical. It's pretty. Doesn't he get baptized twice or something? I don't
Well, there's a story about how they kept getting baptized because they wanted new shirts. Because every time they were baptized, they would be given a new linen shirt. And also in Bernard Cornwell's Last Kingdom series, there's a scene it's probably in the first book, but might be in the second, where the priests want to baptize this Viking warrior, and he looks at him and he goes, "You want to wash me?"
Those are fun books.
They are.
Yeah, and it's a
They're
good
really
show.
good.
Something Lagertha said to Ragnar, he'd been hurt. The Earl's men had raided the farm. Remember, they raided the
Hmm.
farm, they burned it, and Ragnar just barely escaped, but he got injured, and they went and hid with Floki.
Hmm.
And he wants to go back and duel the Earl, challenge him to a duel. And Lagertha is, he still wasn't recovered, he still wasn't at full health. And she says, what did she say? Never fight unless the odds are in your favor. And I was like, smart
Wise words.
woman. But I also thought it was good that they didn't just focus on that she could fight like we were talking about because there was a scene late in the first season, I think, where she has a miscarriage. And I was like, no matter how much of a badass shield maiden you are, you can end up pregnant and
Hmm.
have a baby. And childbirth was a dangerous thing for women in that time period. And I thought that was good to show that part of her life, that it was
Yes.
important and that it was sad and they were both grieving that it had happened. And yeah, I really appreciated that they still showed that.
Yes, very much so. Well, and then they have when Ragnar goes off to the thing, they have a plague,
Oh,
and
right.
the
Yeah.
entire village is Lagertha is left to take care of everyone, and they're all
Hmm.
just sick and dying.
Even her
Um,
own daughter. Yeah.
and she's alone to deal with that. Shows what she had to deal with when she was left in charge.
Hmm.
Um, Not that Ragnar could have done any more, but she was alone. She had no one else to help her.
Hmm.
So it was her responsibility.
Yeah, that was a good part of the show.
It
Just
was.
it was very poignant when they were burning all the bodies and then they had to burn her daughters. And
Yeah.
I think the
Oh
end of
my
the
gosh.
episode was her standing at the fjord at the water's edge, just looking kind of like, geez, this is rough. And she's
And I think
shown weaving and like teaching her daughter how to weave and
and
teaching her
telling
daughter to.
stories, telling the myths.
Oh yeah, they were always telling. I loved that too. They were always telling stories.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because that was their television, you know.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't have books, they didn't have TV. So storytelling was that's why it was such a big deal. I mean, it was being a skald or a storyteller was really important, and it
Hmm.
became even more so. Um, and that was true in many cultures, not just
Yeah.
the Scandinavian culture.
Yeah. Anything that's pre-literate, they always had storytelling. I
Hmm.
mean, and yeah, and even when he was gone and she was left in charge, she was also just and, handled things well. They showed her like, was it a husband and a wife? And,
Presiding.
yeah, yeah. So she was just. And then they also, you're talking about including all the storytelling. They also did a good job of including their belief in the gods and
Yes.
fate. That's brought up all the time. The gods will decide it's not our fate. This is our fate. We need to talk to the gods. We need to sacrifice to the gods. It's really woven into the story with all the characters.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah, and also like you started to mention it earlier, uh, like in the saga, she does get remarried
Hmm.
and she does kill that husband, but in the show, like
It was
it's
justifiable.
justifiable.
And I really love the way she does it. So this is definitely a spoiler, but um, he sends his henchmen in to beat her up at night in
Really
the
beat her
long,
up. Well,
yeah,
this is
really beat
after
her up.
she had
Defied him.
defied him many times. He tried to rape her once and she kind of beat
Mhm.
him up. And so, yeah, he
He
was not
wants
happy.
to subdue her, so he
Hmm.
sends a number of men into, and she knows they're coming, but she can't fight them off because there were
There's
too
like
many.
four of them, I think.
Yes. And in the next morning, she's sitting at the breakfast table, completely beaten up. I mean, black eye, swollen face, really looks terrible. And she's sitting there scowling at the table. And her husband comes up and starts kind of teasing her about it. I don't remember what he said. And she gets up and stabs him in the eye with her eating knife.
Yeah. Wasn't he about to like rip her dress open? I think he
Something
was
like,
about to rip her
yeah,
dress open in front of
yeah.
everybody. And that's when she stabbed him in the eye.
And then her would-be lover comes up and whacks his head off, but he's already dead because when you get stabbed in the eye with an eating knife, you're dead.
Ugh, can you imagine?
I know.
I guess if you get it just right, you probably die quickly, but if you didn't, that would be horrible.
It would. He deserved it though.
Ugh, he was terrible. Yeah,
So
yeah.
she did think it would be pleasanter to rule without her husband. And this is kind of the, what probably really was true. I mean, whether it was that dramatic or not, he probably was an abusive husband.
Yeah,
And she probably did need to get rid of him.
yeah.
She
Did
killed two husbands, one of them at their wedding ceremony later on in the series. And
oh, really?
I don't remember this whole story, but yeah. They're getting married and she stabs him at the wedding ceremony.
I don't know if I'd want to marry
Yeah,
Lagertha.
well, after that, I don't think she got married again.
Right?
But she
I
didn't
don't,
need to either.
yeah.
This was her way of gaining wealth and power.
Hmm. That's funny.
But that was the
And
way men did it too,
yeah, that's true.
not through
And
marriage, but through killing off anybody who was above them.
yeah, that's true. I mean, Ragnar in the
Yep.
show became the Earl because he dueled with the residing Earl and killed him.
Yep.
And then nobody questioned it. It was just that was how things were. Everybody was there. That was just how
Hmm.
things were done.
And they didn't blame Lagertha, but Saxo did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what a bad woman.
They probably appreciated it in the Viking Age. They probably would have called her like, the Bold or something, given her some kind of cool nickname.
Absolutely. And Catherine Winnick's portrayal of this care of
Mm,
Lagertha really changed how people thought about Viking Age women. And because the first couple seasons were so based in what we knew, in fact, that we knew, it really opened people's eyes. And
mm,
she became quite a sensation. And this is, years before BJ 581.
hmm
So she actually brought shield maidens to life. They'd only
hmm
been kind of a myth before. But she
hmm
made us see how a woman could really do that.
Yeah. Yeah. She did a great job.
Hmm.
Hmm
And her part was written beautifully. It
It
really
really
was.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't just like one-sided one way or the other. None of the women in the show were
Yeah,
one-dimensional.
that's right.
They were all the people in the show were. Because like, even Ragnar when he comes back from raiding and he finds out that she had miscarried their child, he was very sad about that. And he was
Mhm.
kind of mad at the gods because they'd done this. Like, they gave me the earldom and then they took my son. He was pretty upset and she was upset. And I like that they show them having like real human emotions and oh my gosh, there was a story that Ragnar told his son Bjorn about I don't remember what Bjorn had asked him. Oh, something about being happy. And Ragnar was like, "Why do you expect to be happy?" He's like, "I had a lot of friends when I was your age. They're all dead." And so I don't expect to be happy. And I was like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, the average age in the Viking era was age 25. So that means the average age of the population was 25. And
Mm, yeah.
so it was a very young population, not very
Yeah.
many old bones.
I wouldn't want to live to be old back then.
No, no. I mean, they
Honestly,
didn't,
it was probably a gift to die at 40 in that
yep,
time period.
yep. Considering
Yeah.
they didn't have much in the way of dental,
hmm
they some of the grave findings they find is that, people were suffering horribly from some of the chronic diseases and especially dental issues
Mm,
that they had no cure for except pulling the teeth.
hmm
And that went on for centuries. That was
hmm
up until pretty recently, there was no
Yeah.
dentistry.
Why, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, why are our mouths such a weakness in humans? Like
Mm,
our
yeah.
teeth and our mouths are they're so like delicate and so easy.
Well,
Yeah.
part of it's our diet, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's true.
Modern person's diet.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it was a good point you made about the TV show and their depiction of Lagertha being before the discovery that BJ 581 was a woman. Like that
Yeah,
they were ahead of the curve
they
showing
were.
this woman who was a shield maiden. She's also a mother, and then she becomes like a leader in her own right. And
And they did show, fairly accurately how people did rise in the ranks in these smaller communities. And, because at the time, Norway itself was divided into like 30 different kingdoms that were all at war with each other
hmm
because everybody claimed themselves to be a king or a
right.
jarl. And the main difference between a king and a jarl was that a jarl paid tribute to the king, so anybody could call themselves a king
Right.
if they were just tough enough.
Right. Right. Exactly. You didn't become a king by being a pushover.
Nope, definitely not. And it wasn't really by inheritance either because you were elected. Jarls and kings were elected. They still had to be accepted by their warriors and their nobles.
hmm Yeah, but I imagine if a son was a good fighter and generous with the men, that people would just be like, okay, so and so's son
Sure.
can be
But
a
they
king.
but they did he did
But
have
they
to
had to
be
prove
elected.
themselves. Mhm.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, because they did hold elections at the thing for these positions.
So anything else about Lagertha?
I
I'm
can't think
sure
of it right now. We may
some
have
more
to
will come up.
dip,
Yeah.
yeah, we may have to dip back into her later, but
Okay, so now we're gonna We
can
go
go
back
on
into
to
history.
Aslaug. Yep.
So we'll dip back into actual history and sagas and stuff to talk about Aslaug.
Yes. So Aslaug is mentioned in at length in the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok. She is not really mentioned in Saxo Grammaticus. What's interesting is in the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, Lagertha is not mentioned at all. She's not even part of the story. So Aslaug is the daughter of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer and Brynhild. So her saga comes, or Ragnar's saga comes after the saga of the Volsungs. And
Should we briefly explain who Sigurd the Dragon Slayer and Brunhilde
y-
are?
yeah, we can.
So she was a Valkyrie.
Yep. And there's several different stories about them, but basically it's a story where Brynhild ends up married to the wrong man, and he ends up married to another woman. They're in love, but because of deception, they end up married to other people. And Brynhild becomes very angry and has him killed. And then, out of regret, she throws herself on his pyre, his funeral pyre, and and kills herself. And so they leave a daughter, Aslaug. And we don't know exactly how old she was, but she was very small when they were killed, when they killed themselves. And she becomes the ward of her foster father, a man named Heimer, who is apparently a king as well. That's what's mentioned. But after the death of Brynhild, who was his foster daughter, it saddened him to the point where he doesn't feel that he can maintain his kingdom. He falls into a depression and he feels that he can't command his warriors enough to protect Aslaug, who's now his responsibility.
That's interesting. There's a lot of little nuggets in the sagas about these men who are so heartbroken over
Yes.
the death of a wife or the death of a child that they just like fall into a deep depression and can't go on. And I don't know
Yes.
why that rarely gets portrayed in
Well,
or
it wasn't
did.
manly,
It wasn't manly, I guess. And I guess people are kind of rectifying that. But yeah.
but it's definitely mentioned in this saga
Mhm.
that he became. And so what he does is he has a giant harp made. This is really stretching the imagination. So a giant harp is made, and in it he hides the little girl Aslaug and some treasure. It's mentioned in the saga that he has some like beautiful clothing, some gold and silver jewelry is all hidden in this harp. And he abdicates his throne and he becomes an itinerant minstrel.
How does he
Now, how
lug
he,
that giant harp around?
yeah, it makes me wonder. It had to have been on a cart.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it's big enough to hold a little girl, even if she was only 2 or 3 years old, you couldn't just like carry it around on your back. It had to be on a cart. But they don't really, they don't go into any details about this. So he travels around and ends up in Norway. Um, and he asks for shelter from this farm couple. And the husband is away, and the wife says, "Sure, you can stay," and sends him to the barn. And while he's there, she notices there's like a gold ring that's like hanging out of this.
Mm.
When he closed up the harp case the last time, there was a gold ring hanging out. And she sees it and she gets all excited. So when her husband gets home, she tells him about it and they murder Heimer. And then they open the harp and find this little girl.
Hmm.
Well, she's a beautiful little girl and they want to adopt her. So they do, but they're afraid because they're not noble people, they're very ugly. And she is beautiful. So there's nobody would believe that they could have a child that's that beautiful and no obviously noble. So they shave her head and tar it so that her hair can't grow back. They dress her in rags and they have her do all kinds of menial work, which of course one of their daughters would do. They don't really turn her into a slave, but she does have to work hard. So they raise her. This is how she grows up. and they
It's
named
like
her,
Cinderella a little
it
bit.
is kind of, they name her Kraka,
Mm.
which means crow. And that was also a further deception. But obviously, they cared for her because otherwise, why would they raise her and go to all this trouble? So, meanwhile, Ragnar is the son of Sigurd Ring, who is the king of Denmark. And he was a famous warrior who ends up committing suicide because when he's an old man, he can't marry the maiden of his choice. That's another story I won't go into. But anyway, he's the son of Sigurd Ring, who was apparently still a viable king at this time. But Ragnar won the hand of a king's daughter, Thora, which is the woman that he supposedly divorces Lagertha
Mhm.
for in Saxa Grammaticus. So it could be that that first story about Lagertha is not included in the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok.
It's already happened.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if that's true, but it is possible. So anyway, he has to, this is how he got the name Lothbrok or Hairy Pants, according to this. He has to slay a serpent or dragon that guards her. Well, this serpent was originally like a little snake that was her father had given her as a
All
gift.
right.
And it grew and grew and grew until it encircled her bed. Um, and nobody could get near her because the serpent was protecting her. So he grew into a monster. It's originally a pet. So the king says, well, anybody who can kill this dragon or serpent can have my daughter as a wife. Well, Ragnar has this suit made of hairy, tarred hide that protects him from the dragon. Now, I don't know whether it's fire-breathing dragon or whether it's poisonous, but he's got these hide pants that have the hair on the outside and has them tarred. So you can imagine they're really stiff. And a shirt also. So he goes and manages to slay the dragon and marries Thora. They have children, and eventually Thora dies, and I believe it's from illness, not in childbed, but in illness. And so Ragnar is widowed in this story, and he has his two sons by Thora. So Ragnar and his men are traveling and they come to this farm in Norway where Aslaug lives with her foster parents. And as is apparently common, these he sends his men ashore to bake bread, and they go to use this farm couple's kitchen for their baking. And while they're doing this, they see Aslaug, and she has just bathed, so she doesn't look terrible, and apparently her hair has grown out. Her beauty distracts them to the point where they burn the bread. Well, they go back to the ship, and Ragnar's kind of pissed about the bread being burned, and they confess why they had burned it. So Ragnar says he wants to meet this woman, but she must come to him neither clothed nor naked, eating nor fasting, not alone nor with another person. So, Aslaug is really intrigued by this, and she's very clever. She solves the riddle. She comes to Ragnar wearing a fishing net, biting an onion, accompanied by a dog. So they were married and they had their own sons, and they had four or five sons. So Eystein, the king of Sweden, wants Ragnar to marry his daughter Ingebjorg. And Ragnar's willing because Aslaug
Mm.
is not really a proper primary wife because she's not noble. Because she's of lower class, he can take a second wife. But Ragnar reveals, I mean, Aslaug reveals her true parentage. And Ragnar realizes he has to break off the engagement because he already has a queen for a wife. He's already got a noble woman, a royal woman of royal blood. And he apparently can't replace her with another woman of royal blood. So that kind of makes us see their hierarchy a little bit. If
Hmm.
Aslaug was really a commoner, she would be able to be replaced by a woman of noble blood because that's more of a marriage of state.
Hmm. She could have been a concubine or a second wife or something if
Correct.
she was willing.
Yes. And so, of course, all this time, Aslaug has been called Kraka Crow, and she reveals that her real name is Aslaug, which, interestingly enough, means something like bath of the gods.
Nice.
Laug means washing,
Yeah.
and of course, the as
Mm.
is the gods. So,
Hmm.
God's bath or something like that is what her name means. Anyway, the Swedish king is really furious when Ragnar breaks off the engagement. Meanwhile, Ragnar's two sons by Thora have gone to Sweden raiding, and the king kills them. Well, this is considered very unjust, even though they're the ones who started the raid, but Ragnar is really upset about it, his sons being killed. So um, Aslaug changes her name to Randalin, which means warrior shield. And I wonder if it means something like shield maiden.
Mm.
I mean, the direct interpretation is Randa and Lynn both mean shield,
Mm.
but maybe it means something like shield maiden.
Yeah.
Anyway, she changes her name and she organizes a fleet. Oh, Ragnar's away, by the way. She organizes a fleet and she convinces her own sons to go and avenge these stepbrothers of theirs. And they don't want to because
Mm.
they're not my brothers. Why should we go? She convinces them, she shames them into it. And she accompanies them. She has her own fleet of 10 ships, but her other sons get all gather a fleet. And so they sail with a huge fleet. And
How are all these sons all grown? Like,
well, obviously many years have passed.
I guess so. It seems like it's all just happening, and like
I know,
his
I
Thora's
know.
sons are grown, and these sons are grown, and all the sons are grown.
Well, they kind of skip the boring
I
parts.
guess so.
Anyway, King Eystein has a secret weapon. He has an enchanted cow that moos so terrifyingly that no one can fight against it because the mooing just completely. Now, I do not know how that came about, but this cow is a monster and he's a secret weapon. It's obviously a female cow. So there's no way to fight against this cow because he completely disables whole armies. But Ivar the Boneless has his men make enough noise to drown out the cow's mooing, and he directs them to throw him onto the cow. So first he shoots the cow with a giant bow and arrow, and then his men throw him onto this cow as she runs past. And he manages to kill the cow while riding her.
That is so
That's
bizarre.
crazy.
I don't know why I'd never heard that before about the enchanted cow
I had not heard it either, and I
with
was
her
so
scary moo.
surprised. Yeah, scary, terrifying moo. I was quite surprised too.
Oh my
I suppose
gosh.
it's considered very un-Vikingly to have a be terrified of a cow.
Right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Anyway, the brothers are able and Randolin are able to defeat King Eystein, and after this, she returns home to be with Ragnar, and they live, happily for a while. But then he sets out for England, and he ignores her advice to bring a larger fleet of smaller ships. Instead, he goes in one big ship. So she gives him this magical shirt of protection, and it's woven of a single gray hair. So he can't be killed. Um,
Handy.
it's very handy. In England, King Aella, who is features in Vikings, engages Ragnar's force in battle, and he kills all of Ragnar's men, but the shirt protects Ragnar from harm, though not from capture. So Aella captures him and has him thrown into the snake pit, the famous snake pit. So the shirt protects him from their bites until Aella figures out to have him stripped, have all his clothes taken off. Then the snake bites him And as he died, Ragnar says the famous line, "How the little pigs would squeal if they knew how the old boar suffered." So that's a very famous line. So, of course, the sons of Ragnar seek revenge, but that's another story. What's really interesting is we actually hear that Randalin lives to become an old woman, and she even composes a verse.
Hmm.
So we do hear a little bit about her um,
Hmm.
after after her main part of the story's done.
Nice.
About the only time. So that is the story
That's the
of
historical
Aslaug.
story.
Well,
Well,
semi-historical
except for the dragon
dragons
and
and monster
the,
cows.
yeah, and the giant harp that can
Right.
conceal a child and all his treasure. Yeah. Other than that, oh, and the magical shirt. Yeah. I just love that about the old stories, though. That just like it'll seem like it's just okay, here's this battle and here's this king and they do this and that and marry this person and that person and then just randomly in there it'll be like, "Oh yeah." And then there was this magical cow.
Yeah. And that magical cow does not appear in the Vikings show.
No. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the show again.
Yes.
So if you don't want spoilers, now's a good time to step away.
Yes.
So
That's
Aslog's story is quite different in
she
Vikings, other
does
than how he meets her and her the way she did responded to the riddle.
right. That's about the only thing. And then she does tell him that she is a princess and the daughter of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer and Brynhild. And perhaps that's why Ragnar feels he can take her
Hmm.
as a second wife. But he does. He brings her home
No,
and
he didn't bring her home.
oh,
Remember?
that's
He
right.
left her. They slept together, and then she told him that she knew that she was going to be carrying his child. He goes
That's right.
back, and then she shows up in Norway and she's already showing pregnant.
Right.
But the whole thing about his men seeing her, she's bathing, and they're so struck by her beauty, and he,
But her don't the shield maidens capture them,
yeah,
her men,
right.
and
That's right. She has
bring
shield
them
maidens.
back
Yeah,
to Ragnar
yeah,
in shame from
yeah.
being
And Ragnar's
captured by
like,
women.
what the heck? And she's eating an apple, not an onion, I think, in the
I
show.
think that's right.
Because
Yeah,
an
they
onion,
change it a little bit.
that's
And
gross.
she's not a slave, she's a princess.
Right.
She knows, she's well aware of who she is and she's
Yeah.
conducting herself as a princess.
And he immediately fell for her in the show.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I don't know whether her royal blood had something to do with it because he's a very ambitious man.
Mm.
And so it's possible that he feels, and that doesn't come out in the show, but it's just something that to think about that marrying someone of royal blood is going to elevate him in status.
Hmm. Well, he was ambitious in the show,
Very much so. Yeah.
so that makes sense. And she was a bit of a seeress, and she told him that they would have many sons together, and he was all about that. So that probably played a part too.
And those things do come out in the saga. And she tells him about Sigurd Snake in the Eye. She tells
Hmm.
him that the serpent's going to be there, and that is in the show as well.
Hmm.
She weaves this magical shirt out of a single gray hair to protect him. So it's mentioned a few times that she's a sorceress or a
Hmm.
seeress, and that she's trying to prove this to Ragnar to prove that
Hmm.
she does have magic. But it's only just a kind of a sideline. But
There
she,
was a
of course,
point when
sees him.
she gave birth to Ivar the Boneless, and Ragnar was gonna expose him. And she waited until Ragnar walked away, and then she went and she grabbed him, and she was just like, "Nope, I don't know what we'll do, but we're gonna keep this child."
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
so there's in none of the stories does Ragnar have two wives at the same time.
right.
He doesn't marry Ingebjorg because he's got a noble wife. He almost
Hmm.
has two wives, but he never does in these sagas. But in this Viking series, they show Lagertha just having enough of this, and she's not willing to share her home with this other woman,
Yeah.
and she
It was
divorces him, divorces Ragnar in a what's a well-documented way. She proclaims it in
hmm
front of everyone, and she says, "I'm leaving because this is not, this is not. I
this
can't
is
accept it.
humiliating.
It's humiliating." Exactly.
It was kind of funny though when they were both the women were at the feast and he's just like, "This is great, right?" And they're both like,
Not really.
and then he's just like, the actor he played that well
Yeah.
whenever the two women were together and he was half like, "Oh, this is fun. I have both these women I'm in love with and la la la." And then the other part of him is just like, "Oh, this is really uncomfortable." He did a good job with that. But yeah, I thought it was cool that Aslaug or Lagertha was like, "Nope, I am not going to be wife number two or anything. I'm not going to share." And she's just took off with her son.
Yeah, and then, poor Aslaug is really kind of defamed in the series. She's a neglectful mother. She's an alcoholic. She's wastrel and layabout and really kind of evil. And so we really end up hating her after a
Mm.
while. And of course, her
Well,
sons
not at
aren't the
first
best
though.
either. Not at
Not
first.
at first, yeah.
Right. It's a transition.
Mm. But she gave birth to those four sons, like bam, 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 like really super fast.
Yeah, very fast.
Yeah. So,
So, yeah, she was much maligned. She never becomes Randolin. She never becomes
mm,
a warrior queen. And unfortunately, there's no mention of an enchanted cow.
that would have been fun.
Yeah.
I
But
think they
she is
tried
the
to
mother
stick.
of all of his sons that survive in this
Mm.
in the saga,
Well,
Björn
except for,
included.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Because in the
Björn is
show,
her
Bjorn was Lagertha's
right.
son.
But that's where it varies from the
Uh,
so the two sons of Thora, Ragnar's first wife in the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, she has two sons and they're both killed.
mhm.
Then all the
Mm,
surviving sons of Ragnar Lothbrok are all from Aslaug. So
mm. I wonder why they chose to change that. I guess they wanted Lagertha to have one kid, I guess. So
yeah,
they gave her Bjorn.
Bjorn is kind of the glue that holds the show together.
Mm,
He's what keeps these people in contact,
that's true.
Lagertha and Ragnar.
Mm,
So I thought it was a good, even though it varied from the sagas, it was a good choice.
hmm
And of course, they don't really mention the daughter anywhere except in the TV show, of course, as
Yeah.
usual.
And then she dies.
Yeah, and then she dies very early. But I felt like the whole brother thing was conducted pretty well, and the family relations.
hmm
Um,
hmm
and then how Lagertha later comes to Ragnar's rescue,
hmm
as she does in Saxo's.
hmm
Um, but it kind of displaces Aslaug, so she becomes this evil woman, the other
Mm.
woman.
That's too bad.
It is because in the sagas she's not like that at all.
And they could, at least at first with Aslaug, I thought they did a good job of like, here's Lagertha, she's a fighter, she's a shield maiden. And then you have Aslaug, who's a little bit more of a seeress, and she's giving birth to all his sons. And then we have some other women who represent other parts of womanhood in the Viking age. So it's too bad that they ultimately did Aslaug wrong. But I
Hmm.
guess maybe they needed somebody to be a witch or something. I don't know.
Well, it's just, yeah, I'm sure that their plotting framework needed her
Hmm
to be that way. And they'd
Yeah.
already killed off the evil Jarl, so they needed someone else to be evil. And
Yeah.
but it also gave Lagertha a much stronger part.
Mm.
It made her appear much stronger, built her character. So maybe that was the whole purpose of it.
Yeah, maybe. So should we talk about a few of the other, well, not a few, but
Yeah.
like one or two of the other women?
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
as Johanna and I were talking before we started recording about how much on this second time through, I really, really appreciated the character of Siggy, and I didn't as much the first time I watched
I didn't
it.
either at first. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was the original, the first Jarl's wife, and she's very much a woman of the sagas. She's this, at least at first, she was a powerful woman who was behind the scenes in the bedroom and stuff, like goading the husband on, like, don't let this Ragnar guy, supplant you, make sure. And she'd already lost two sons that they were both devastated over. And so, but then once the Earl dies, I thought they did a good job of showing the plight of a woman like that,
Hmm.
about how fraught life could be, even when you thought you were fine because you were this highborn, wife of a an earl, and but take him out, and now what? Now she's got to scramble to survive. Does she leave? Does she stay? She befriended Lagertha, which was very smart, and then she hooked her wagon to Ragnar's brother Rollo, and
Yeah, and it does also kind of show how important it was for both the man and the woman for marriage.
mhm,
It was important for survival because it was pretty kind of like today, it's really hard to survive on one person's income. Back then, it was, they needed the work of both the
mm,
husband and the wife in order to survive and be prosperous. Um,
That's a good point.
they both worked all the time. And
Hmm.
if and that's why if one spouse died, the survivor usually got remarried. That was
Hmm.
common. And it was mainly because how would you survive,
Hmm.
on your own? And it wasn't just the women, the men too,
Oh yeah,
because
they were always getting married right away.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
There was just so much work, so much labor, between the weaving and the farm tending and the children tending and um, the livestock. There's just way too much to do. I mean, I come from farm families, and I know even in the 20th century how much work they had to do.
Hmm.
Um, they worked all the time, night and day,
Hmm.
till morning till
Hmm.
dusk.
Well, and Siggy showed that these women, like, she was smart and wily, and she knew that she had to do whatever she could to protect herself and her daughter. She had a grown daughter at the time,
Hmm.
and if it meant cozying up to an enemy, if it meant shaming, like hooking her wagon to Rollo, and then like shaming him when he becomes like a drunk and isn't going to go do anything, and she's just like, you need to stop feeling sorry for yourself and get up and fight, and I can help you get what you want in this world. But you have to, because he didn't know what was going on, and she was just like, I know. I know what's going on. And if you listen to me, I can help you. And so I liked that portrayal of her
Hmm.
being smart. I don't know what they did with her towards the end, but
Oh, she dies towards the end. I
okay.
remember that because she she falls into an ice hole. I think a child falls in and she's trying to help the child and she drowns. It was
Oh,
kind of a heroic end for her.
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, the wise counsel of the women and the wives is always pointed out in the sagas.
Hmm.
It's very important. And also them shaming the men and inciting the men into action because they know what needs to be done.
Hmm.
Rondalyn is a typical woman who's shaming her sons into taking vengeance for her stepsons. They're not
Hmm.
even her biological children, but she has a very strong sense of honor, and she's the one who shames her sons into doing it, and then she goes with them.
That was really common in the Icelandic sagas. The
Hmm.
the the mother who would shame the sons into avenging the other son, the other brother or whatever, or the father or something.
Hmm.
Yeah, that scene where she was shaming Rollo was pretty funny.
I bet. I didn't see that one. I didn't watch that one again, so I'm gonna have
Yeah,
to continue on. It's fun to rewatch it.
yeah. But she always wanted her high status back. But she was smart enough to befriend Lagertha and Aslaug. Like, if she could
Hmm.
at least that would at least keep her safe.
Yes.
And then I just wanted to briefly mention Helga, who got married to Floki. Was on season one or two.
Yeah.
She was pregnant at one point, and she said, I think to Siggy, she said, "We just give birth to the slaughtered." And I was like, that was a great
Oh,
line.
what a
That was a
line. Oh
great
my
line.
goodness.
It must have felt like that to some of them, especially when they were like that, where they were kings or jarls or whatever who would go out raiding or whatever, or battling or campaigning or whatever every summer. Must have felt like that. I just raised these boys up to what? Just go off and die?
Yeah. But if
It
they
was
stayed home, they'd probably die of something more painful and less quick. That's one thing about Viking era is that they realized there was a lot of value in the quick death
Mm, true.
rather than suffering and, from whatever, dying of tooth decay or something, an abscess tooth.
Ugh,
Can you
gross. That'd be
imagine? I mean,
horrible.
awful.
Yeah. I think a lot about their belief in fate, about go out, if this is my day to die, this is my day to die.
And that's what they had to do in order to have enough courage to,
Mm,
I mean, just think about going into the shield wall.
yeah.
How terrifying that must have been
Hmm.
going into battle. But in a lot of ways, it was a preferable death to what
Yeah.
awaited them if they didn't die.
Yeah, true. Yeah, they did a good job on the show with the shield wall and the battles, showing
Yeah.
just how chaotic it was. And
Yeah. Later on, they kind of go off the rails a bit. And
oh yeah.
but I did think it was interesting. Later on, they have Floki being portrayed as Loki. And
Oh,
Helga is, he gets chained in the cave with the poison dripping on his head. And Helga
oh,
the one
okay.
who's holding the cup there.
Oh,
Yeah, they
okay.
actually show that later on in the season, in the series.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about Lagertha or
I can't think of.
Aslaug? I
I
think we
think we
really,
covered an awful lot.
yeah. Yeah. So if you are listening and you're okay with lots of violence,
If you're a Viking fan, you
and
probably are.
yeah, and you want to, and you haven't watched the show and you want to, I recommend it, at least the first couple seasons. I thought it
Yep.
was really well done. The characters were good. The writing was good. It was just neat to be immersed in that world and the
Yeah,
politics and the backstabbing. And then the character of Athelstan, the monk who goes back and forth. Yeah, it was interesting.
it was very good.
All right. Well, that was fun.
Yes, very fun.
And I guess we'll see you next time.
Yep.
Bye. Thanks for listening. You can find Johanna at johannawittenberg.com, where you'll find a free short story, a prequel to her Norse Queen series. And you can find me, K.S., at ksbarton.com, where you can also find a free short story from me, a prequel to my Norse family series. See you next time.